Hey everybody, one of the challenges I run into a lot when doing productions for business conferences and that kind of thing is how to handle PowerPoint presentations. There's always the easy way where you just take a laptop and plug in an HDMI, call it good, but I think I've come up with a way that's a lot better than that, and I kind of wanted to show you what I've got going on. It offers a lot of redundancy, a lot of functionality, a lot of ways to just make sure that everything's going to go smoothly in terms of making sure that your production goes over well and your client is happy. So with that, let's dive right on in. All right, so I have here in front of me, and I'll show you guys kind of a top-down view, a rig that I put together that actually fits in one rack space of an equipment rack. And this handles basically all of my PowerPoint presentations for all of my productions that I do these days. So this was assembled on mostly out of stuff that I already had laying around. But it works really well. I've used this for, I think, 3 or 4 different shows now. And client's happy, I'm happy, my production crew is happy with everything that this allows us to do, and with the ease at which it allows us to do that. So a lot of words there. All right, so with that, let's kind of just go on and talk about what is actually in this rig. So bring it over a little bit, and I apologize in advance for any fan noise that you hear. So this device right here, which I'll get to in a moment, has a pretty noisy fan in it. So the little computers that you see over here are silent, basically, unless you're really doing something heavy on them. But this does make a lot of noise. Anyway, so the basic idea here is to have 2 computers, which are already set up and ready to go, fully configured with Windows, software installed, whatever. And the idea behind that is to actually have redundancy. So you have 2 computers that are set up with PowerPoint, have the PowerPoint presentations loaded onto them and ready to go for your client. And if something happens to one, you've got the other one, which is already ready. Not just ready, but it's actually showing the same presentation, always on the same slide. And so you've got an immediate failover. So something happens, you're already ready to go with the backup. Additionally, if you don't need redundancy, you can use one for whoever is currently presenting, and then use the other one for whoever is next, and they can be reviewing their slides, going through them, clicking through them one at a time, making sure that everything looks the way that they expect it to, got the right fonts, the right graphics, that video plays, everything ahead of time, so that there are no surprises when their actual presentation goes live. So let me kind of go through what I've got going on here and talk a little bit more about how it's all set up and configured and how it all works. So as mentioned, we've got 2 different computers here. These are actually both Intel NUC computers, and let me show you guys kind of a sort of a side front view there. So these are a little bit older at this point. This is a 12th generation version, and this is an 11th generation version. Intel has sold this division of the company over to Asus. So Asus is now selling these. They're still calling them the NUCs, and you see it stands for Next Unit of Computing. It's a bit of a weird name, but I use a ton of these things. I have probably a dozen of these things in various places. And if you get the right one, they can be pretty fast, certainly fast enough to run a PowerPoint presentation, and they aren't that expensive. There are other computers from other brands which can work just as well, if not better, and maybe cost a little bit less. This is what I had, and so that's what went into this rack and this configuration. So connected to each one of these computers, I'm moving a little bit further back, I have 2 HDMI to SDI converters. These are from Blackmagic. These are the 3G version of their microconverters, and those output their SDI video over here to, this is a Blackmagic Design Multiview 4, and let me show you what the output of that actually looks like. And so what we're seeing here is basically 2 monitor outputs from each computer. And the reason I do 2 is so that you have one for the actual presentation that everybody's going to be watching, and then one for the presenter view. So you can put that up on a downstage monitor, and they can see their notes, they can see what slide is next, etc., and know exactly where they're at, and have all that confidence of having all that material at the ready right in front of them. Because there's 2 computers, you're seeing 2 different rows. So the upper row with kind of the blue background, that's for the first computer, and the one below it with purple, that is the second computer. Now, the output of the multi-view here is normally connected to a 4K monitor that I keep there on at the tech table where we've got everything set up. And the reason I do 4K on that is so that I'm viewing all of these 4 computer outputs in their native resolution. These computers are outputting at 1080, 1080p, so 1920 by 1080. In this case, 59.94 frames per second. And that goes into the multi-view, which then outputs a 4K signal, and each of those 4 quadrants of the image is a native 1920 by 1080 signal. Having that native 4K monitor allows me to see each of those in its native pixel per pixel view. Super handy to have a 4K monitor. It makes it where you can actually read the text on those things and see exactly what's going on, and make it really easy for anybody who's operating this to be able to see what's going on with each of the different outputs, each of the different views that's coming out of these computers. So you got your presenter view for each of your 2 computers, and then you've got your presentation view for each of your 2 computers as well. Now the output of the multi-view 4, I'm using the HDMI here to go to a monitor, or in this case, the switcher that I'm using to run this video. But it also has an SDI output as well, and that could be used to run to another monitor somewhere else or whatever. So as mentioned, one of the ways that I've used this is to have the second computer set up as the computer for the next presenter, to have that ready to go. And what we've kind of done with that, in that case, is we want to have them outside the room where we happen to be working. Usually on most of the shows that I'm working, we are set up in the same room as the conference that we happen to be working on. And because there's going to be some interaction there, people talking, it's nice to have that run off somewhere else. And so we've got the SDI signal here that shows the quad view. We can run back further backstage or to another room or whatever, and then they can actually see what's going on. And I'll show you more about how that works here in a little bit. But the basic idea here is 2 computers with 2 outputs each, converted to SDI, going into a multi-view 4 to make that a quad view, and then that's what we view on the local monitor. Now the output that needs to go to the video switcher that for display on the downstage monitors or on the projectors for iMag or for the LED wall or out to your live stream or whatever, a couple different ways that's handled. Because each of these HDMI to SDI converters has 2 outputs, I can either use these SDIs here to get those signals over to my ATEM switcher, or I can use the loop-through outputs that are here on the multi-view 4 in order to get those as well. So I really have 2 copies of those signals available here at the back of this unit in order to send over to the switcher. From there, I will use macros on the ATEM switcher in order to basically do the routing of those 2 signals. So if I need to do the presentation from the first computer, I'll hit a macro button on my panel, which will automatically take the 2 outputs, the 2 video signals from the first computer, route those to 2 of the downstage monitors. One of them, put that available as a preview so I can see what's going on before I take that live. And then I also use that to route the audio on some of the audio channels on the ATEM constellation that I normally use this with. So one of the features that Blackmagic has added to the constellations in the last couple of years is the ability to route audio from any of your different sources. So what I'll do is I'll take the audio from whichever computer is currently going to be used for presentation and output that on, say, channels 5 and 6 of the main program output, and then I'll use an SDI to audio converter from Blackmagic, one of their MIDI converters, in order to extract that audio to send that over to the audio mixer. Therefore, I don't have to have dedicated audio channels from these computers. It's actually going as part of the SDI output. Nice thing about that is I can also have that recorded as part of my master program record, and then there's always that extra copy of that audio in that recording should I need to go back and do anything with that in the final edit. So with that said, I'm going to show you a couple other things that are pretty neat about this setup. So if we go back to the quad view here, one of the things I can do here on this multi-view 4 is I can switch it between the quad view and a single view. So if I need to blow up one of these monitors and see it with a little more clarity, I can literally just press one of the buttons here on the front, and that switches over to single view, and then rotating the wheel on the front switches between the 4 different sources. And therefore, it's really easy for me to see what's going on. And because that is not being sent through the loop outputs that are on the back of here, nor through the HDMI to SDI converters, I can do that at any point and see what's going on with any of those outputs in nice high resolution without affecting what's going on with the program feed or what's going out to the downstage monitors or the projectors or whatever else. So super handy there. And then once I need to go back to the quad view again, I can literally just press button 2 on the front, and that switches back to that. So I'm going to make one little change here. So normally I don't have this set up exactly like this. I make one small little tweak here if I go into the menu here and make one setting change. There we go. I get rid of that border so that I'm able to view all of the pixels on each of those 4 displays without having any of it overridden by the border that's added by the device. So it does make it look a little bit weird, like it's one really wide desktop, but that really is 2 separate outputs that are coming out of the computer. All right, so with that, let me dive a little bit more into how I've got this wired. So that if you choose to do this, you can do the same. It looks like a lot of wires, but it's actually pretty simple. So let's go over and take a look at that. There we go. All right, so as of right now, this is all being held in place by some 3M dual lock. I actually use I forget what the exact name of it, but it's the thinner stuff. The normal stuff's kind of thick, and in the case of, say, this multi-view, which is basically 1U rack high, using the full height stuff, it makes this too tall and doesn't really fit properly in a single rack space. But using the thinner stuff, it actually fits pretty well into this shelf. This is just a generic shelf, nothing fancy about this. I just made sure to get one that was big enough or deep enough to house all the components that I have going on here. So, okay, so the computers and the converters and everything are all held in place by the dual lock, and let me show you a little bit more about the wiring. So you notice here, I've got wire kind of stuffed in there, and this does all fit just fine inside of 1U rack space. So if I lift this up, you can see that underneath of the converter here, I actually have a USB hub. And so one of the USB outputs on each computer powers the hub, and then plugged into the hub are cables that are being used to power each of these HDMI to SDI converters. So by doing that, I don't have to have any sort of separate power going into this. I'm literally just providing power for the 2 computers and then for the multi-view, and then everything else is powered off of those. You can see that there are HDMI cables here. So these computers have 2 HDMI connections on the back natively. I don't have to do any conversion on it. And that's pretty common for sort of the mid-range and higher end version of these little mini computers. But those just literally route directly into the converters, and that gets the signal, HDMI signals from the computer into the converters, and then just have some SDI cables going from the output of these over into the multi-view 4. And then, as mentioned earlier, have the second output of these going over to my ATEM switcher, so those signals are available to be switched. One thing that would be kind of cool to do with something like this would be to get one of Blackmagic's new little mini video hubs, say the one that has 6 inputs and 4 outputs, and then you can have the 4 of these, and then the one SDI from here being routed into that, and then have the ability to route any of those signals to the 4 outputs on that. That way you can send them over to your ATEM or another monitor or whatever you happen to want it to do. That's certainly a neat way to go, but definitely not necessary at all. I don't have one, and this setup has worked really, really well. All right, so that said, as mentioned, each of these converters has an HDMI and a USB, which are coming from the computer, and the output of those goes over to the multi-view 4. There's one other piece here that I didn't actually show you yet, and I'll kind of move this back and then bring it into view. And that is a KVM switch, which in this case is a bit overkill. I don't need to switch the M in the KVM. I don't need to switch the V in KVM. I only need to switch the K and the M. So this is really just switching the USB connections from these computers. So the second USB output that is in here is going to this KVM switch, and then I'm able to switch back and forth between the 2 computers with a button here on the front, and that allows me to use a single keyboard and mouse between the 2. And this is not the one I normally use, but you get the idea. So I always make sure to have a nice high quality keyboard and nice quality mouse on location, and then I can switch between the 2 computers just by pressing the button here. And if I kind of go over to this side view, you can see that I have little stickers on here, one orange and one green, and those indicate the color of the LED output, LED light here on the converter, or the KVM switch, so I know which of the two computers that I happen to be controlling. Now, there are some KVM switches that will allow you to switch using a shortcut on the keyboard. I found those to really be hit and miss. They may not necessarily be super reliable, and you have to have just the right keyboard in order to make those work. So it may take a little bit of trial and error in order to find that, in order to make that work. And sometimes when you have that feature, it doesn't allow you to use a single receiver like I'm using here with a wireless keyboard mouse combo. They really want you to have separate connections for your keyboard and your mouse. So your mileage may vary very much in that regard if you happen to do that. Now, doing it this way also allows me to have other devices plugged in here as well if I need to, but for the most part, I generally only have a keyboard and mouse plugged into the KVM switch, and then if I need to connect other devices such as maybe a USB thumbstick with someone's presentation stored on it, I will plug those directly into the front of the computer and then call it good. So nice and simple, nice and easy. I will probably keep researching to see if I can figure out a way to make this portion of the setup a little bit smaller. Right now I have to kind of stick this on top of the rack that this is in. It doesn't fit here in this equipment rack. So maybe if I could fit a little switch in here to switch between the two different sources for the keyboard and the mouse, then I might do that. But for right now, this does work. It does work pretty well, and I've been very happy with the results of that. All right, now, one of the big challenges that we have with doing live presentations is getting a clicker, some sort of remote, to the presenter. I'm going to show you a couple different solutions for that. One is sort of your budget solution, and then I have one which is sort of like the holy grail, the best solution that's currently out there in order to make that happen. I'll go ahead and start with the best solution that I found, although the version that I'm going to be demonstrating here is the low-end version in the product line. So I'm going to take a look at this product from a company called DSAN, and this is the Perfect Q series of product, and in this case I have the Perfect Q Micro, which is the smallest of the products that they offer, but they all operate absolutely identically, so you can get the cheap one and know that you're going to have just as good a performance as you get with the higher end one, and save quite a bit of money in the process. The one reason that we like to go with these things is these things are just absolutely rock solid. They work really, really well, super reliable, even when there's quite a bit of distance between the presenter and the receiver. So let me go ahead and pull this out of the case here and demonstrate what's included with it. So there is the remote itself. Here is the receiver. And again, I have the micro, so it's the small one. And then it comes with some cables. In this case, it's 2 USB cables. And I'll show you here why there are actually 2, which makes this rig, justifies having this rig even more so. All right. So go ahead and just open up the antenna there. You know that there are two USB connections on here, one on that side and one on this side. And the reason there are two is so you can connect 2 computers for redundancy. So go ahead and plug in the USB here on the side of this one, and then plug it into the computer here on the left. There we go, and that's powered on. And then I will plug in, I need to remove the tie. I haven't used the second cable on this unit yet, so take that tie off. There we go, set that aside. And then I'll plug in the USB on the second side here, and plug that into the second computer. Now, with that set up like that, let's go take a look at the computers. And I'm currently controlling the top one, and I'm going to go ahead and load PowerPoint and launch a presentation, and then use my KVM to switch over to the second computer and do the exact same thing. All right, and go ahead and hit F5 on the keyboard to start it on each of the 2 computers. And there we go. So we have the PowerPoint presentation loaded on both machines, ready to go. And because my Perfect Q receiver is wired to both computers, as I use the remote to advance through the slides, you'll see that both computers are advancing in sync of one another. And one will always be there, ready to go as a redundant backup for anything that's going on. So I can advance through those or move back. This one also has the ability to blank the screen you might consider getting the version of this that doesn't have that button on the remote so that someone doesn't accidentally do that. But anyway, so yeah, so they're using a perfect Q remote that has the two outputs. I'm driving two computers separately, and they remain in sync. And so if something happens to one, the other one serves as a immediate fail-safe that's always available and ready to go. Now, these are a little bit expensive. So the Micro is the least expensive of the product line, and it's a little under $400. If you get the high-end one, it's a little under $1,000. So a little bit expensive, but in my experience, totally worth it, because you get into some of the less expensive ones, and they just are not reliable and at some point are going to fail you, particularly if there is some distance between the presenter and your computer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this, and I'm going to show you another solution that I have set up, which is kind of cool. It has a little bit of additional functionality. So this one right here, this is the Logitech Spotlight remote. Seems like these are being discontinued. So if you want one of these things, you might want to jump on it pretty fast. They have typically sold for about $100, but the price does vary a little bit. So this does work a little bit better than some of the less expensive models that are out there. I found this to be a little bit more reliable than a lot of them. But one of the main reasons I like this one is it has some additional functionality that some of the other ones don't. So if I switch over to... Oh, first of all, let me actually plug it in to one of the computers. So I'll go ahead and do that. So now it's plugged in. It should be ready to go. Now if we take a look at the computer output here, you can see that with that plugged in, obviously since it's only connected to one, it's only going to advance one computer. But yeah, as I press the button here, it actually is advancing these slides. So one of the cool things about this is it has the ability to do a spotlight function. So there we go. So you can actually move your mouse around the screen and highlight certain things that you want to show. You can actually interact with them as well. So as you press that button, it actually does do a click on it as well. So there's other functionality you can program into this as well, but certainly very cool to have that capability. And some presenters really like to have that, be able to highlight things that are on screen. It also has the ability to do a simulated laser pointer, and I believe the other option was a zoom, to zoom in what's on screen as well. But anyway, pretty cool things going on there. Now, one of the main challenges with something like this is if you've got more than, say, 30, 40, 50 feet, like 10, 15 meters between your receiver and the remote, your reliability might not be the best, and you'll be hitting the button up on the stage and nothing happens. And so I've come up with a solution for that as well. And this same solution worked for that other scenario that we talked about a minute ago, where we have to have somebody off in another room in order to do their pre-checks on the presentation before we actually go live. And so what we have is a very cool way to get the USB signal from this sent over a network, so that it can get into one of these computers, which means that the distance, you can physically locate the receiver a lot closer to where the presenter actually is. In a lot of the presentations, a lot of the different conferences that I do, I will actually set up a little network switch just backstage, have this set up as well as other connections as well that are part of my network. So I have a network switch there that is bringing all of my different networks, so my internet, my LAN, my Dante, etc., all showing up backstage, and I can literally just take this connection, plug it into a conversion device, which converts it from USB over to Ethernet, and then send that over the network to the computer. So let me take a look and show you what that device looks like. So that device I'm using for that is this thing right here. It's called the Anyplace USB. This is the 4-port plastic version of it. They have some that are 2 ports and have some that are a little bit higher end and use metal casing. But it has 4 USB ports on it. You can plug in up to 4 devices in there. And then on the other side, you've got Ethernet and then your power connection. So what I can do is literally unplug the USB little dongle from the Logitech presenter remote and plug it into this device. And as always, you have to turn the USB device over at least once when you go to plug it in. There we go. Seeing it's located in port 1. Now, if I switch back over to that computer again, but I'm going to go launch that Anyplace software. And then that's going to scan my network for any of these Anyplace devices. There we go. and we'll go to client mode. You can also have a computer be the server. So if you have a computer backstage, you could plug a device into that. But so we'll go ahead and click on this device here, and it shows a USB receiver. So I can click on that and then click on connect. And there we go, connect success. Now that remote is working over the network, even though it is a USB device, and I can have any amount of distance that I want between those as long as it remains on the same network. It doesn't work directly over the internet. There's ways of making that go, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, so yeah, so I can use one of these less expensive presentation remotes, set it up backstage at the event where the receiver is going to be pretty close to the presenter, and it actually works pretty darn well that way. So very cool way to pull that off. So that's about it in terms of the hardware that I kind of like to use when I'm doing PowerPoint presentations. This can be adapted just slightly in order to use it with KeyNote if you happen to be using Macs. The one downside to that is you're not going to get two Mac Minis in a single rack space, at least not the M4 generation that we currently have. The M4s are just a little bit too tall to fit in a rack space. So if you wanted to use those, you need to go 2 rack spaces or hide it somewhere deeper inside of your equipment case or find another solution entirely. Some of the older Mac Minis like the M1 and M2, they are short enough to fit in a single rack space, but then you wouldn't have the room for the Multiview 4 in this kind of configuration like I showed you here. But otherwise, it works basically the same as what I showed you here with PowerPoint. Another benefit to using Macs is that you actually have the ability to run PowerPoint, all those as well. It doesn't have to be a Windows PC in order to use that. So another few things that I've set up, and I'm not necessarily going to go into today, but I have a single file share set up on one of these computers that the other one has access to. And so as presenters are coming, giving me their USB thumb drives with the presentation on them, or if they email them to me or whatever, I can dump them into that shared folder. Or you can use a cloud folder or whatever, and that way both computers have access to the same files at all times. I like doing it on a local file share so you're not having to wait for the latency of going over the internet or be reliant on an internet connection that may or may not be fast enough or stable enough in order to really be able to rely on that. But putting a file share on one of those computers, and then I set up a shortcut on the desktop for the other one in order to get to that. That way, those files are easily accessible between those two machines and literally any other machine that I have on that same network as well. So, somebody far into the tech table is able to grab a file from somebody, upload it into that folder, so it's therefore ready to go. All right, before I go here, I wanted to demonstrate one other thing that I pretty much always use when I'm doing business conferences and we're working with presenters, and that is a clock. So in addition to the monitors that we have for the presentation, the presenter's view, which has their notes and the next slide, we always set up a third monitor that has a clock. And I like to show both the amount of time that they have remaining as well as the current time of day. And I've demonstrated this here on the channel before, but I want to just make mention of it once again. I actually have a fairly functional clock on my website that's totally free to use. So you don't have to pay anything, you don't have to sign up for anything. It's just there ready to go. And if I go ahead and cut over to that, so you can see here that as I'm recording this, it is just about 9:30 p.m. This is what the clock looks like. Now, normally you'd view it in full screen mode, so that's kind of what it looks like. There are a bunch of configuration options, but I'll kind of get into that here in a moment. So if you want to actually take advantage of this, you can go to your address bar in your browser and type djp.li/djpclock, and then hit enter, and it's going to kind of do a brief landing page here to let you know where you're being redirected to, and then bingo, there it is. So again, this is totally free to use. You can use it as much as you want. I have no issue with that whatsoever. So by default, it shows you the current time of day, but there are some other things you can do. So very quickly, if I just press some number keys here on the keyboard, so if I press the number key 5, it literally goes into a mode where it's doing a 5-minute countdown. So you can see we've got a 5-minute countdown going on, and then in the lower right-hand corner, it then shows the current time of day in a gray font, so it doesn't stand out quite as much, but that allows people to see how much time they've got left. And if I press 1, that'll take it down to 1 minute. You can see that actually the color actually changes to yellow, so let's make it obvious at a glance so they can see, hey, I've only got 1 minute left, and they need to hurry it up. You also got the ability to resize here with some arrows, and then if I want to add or remove seconds from the clock, I can use the minus and plus keys. It's actually technically minus and equal, but yeah, 5 seconds each time you press it. You notice when it went from 30 down to 29 seconds, it switches from yellow to orange. And then as we get down under 10, it'll go to red and start flashing to let them know that, hey, you're really close to being over time. And then once it gets past the 0 point, it will actually switch to a red background and white text and let them know that, hey, you're over. And it's showing a little plus sign there indicating, hey, you've gone over, and it's really time to wrap it up. It'll stop flashing here after 10 seconds. There you go. So you can see the red background lets them know, hey, wrap it up. You're done. It's time to move on. So anyway, lots of cool functionality going on here. I'm not going to go into all of it. If you click on the background for the screen, you can see some of these configuration options. So you can change which time zone it's operating in. You've got some preset drop downs for how much time you want to do for your countdowns. And then over here, you come over this little information icon. If you hover over that, it shows you what the keyboard shortcuts are in order to get do a lot of these commands. So some nice things in there, like R to restart your countdown from the last time you set. So if I did 5 minutes, and then very quickly get it under 3, hit R, it takes it back to the 5 minutes again. So there's also some other stuff here, like for example, if we want to count down to a specific time of day. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so it's going to count down to 2200, which is 10 o'clock p.m., and that is currently 27 minutes away. So lots of cool things, and there's a keyboard shortcut to turn the mini clock on and off, space to pause your countdown, so if you need to take a break for whatever, and then space again to restart it. And then if you hold down the shift key when you click on the numbers, it does it in 5-minute increments. Control does it in 30-minute increments, etc. Yeah, you can pause it and then set the countdown time and have it be paused, and so forth. You can turn on the tenths of a second option there. You can remove the leading zeros if you want. So a lot of different options in order to present it the way that you want to. But anyway, so yeah, there it is. It's absolutely free to use, and you can get to it again through going to djp.li/djpclock, and feel free to use that for any of your presentations, any of your shows that you happen to be doing. So, all right, back to the video. I think that's going to about do it for how I handle these PowerPoint presentations. This setup has worked really well. I'm super happy with this, and in terms of reliability, I feel a lot better about this configuration than just taking someone's laptop and plugging it into an HDMI cable and just crossing my fingers and hoping that it's going to work. As I've mentioned several times on this channel, that seems to be extremely problematic, particularly if somebody's on a newer Mac where the HDMI outputs are just not that super reliable, particularly as you get into like the M1s. Those have definitely had some issues with the HDMI outputs. And so having my own setup that I know works, is tested, all the software is up to date, it's all configured properly, is just super nice to have. But along those lines, it probably pays to spend a little bit of time configuring your computers in order to make sure that they work really well in this sort of scenario. Like for example, I put a little piece of software on there. It's from Microsoft. It's called PowerToys, and there's a feature in there. It's called Awake, and you can literally click on a button in your taskbar and say, keep the computer awake for 2 hours, and therefore you know it's not going to go to sleep on you right in the middle of a presentation. I also make sure to do things like turning off any sort of pop-up alerts that might be going on, turning off any sort of Action Center alerts that are happening, turning off basically any of those things, so make sure that you're not getting any sort of weird random pop-ups happening right in the middle of a presentation and ruining it for everybody. So just making sure that everything's clean, everything's pre-configured, no surprises right in the middle of your show. So anyway, so if you have any questions about any of this, you can certainly ask those in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to answer. But if you want to have a more lengthy discussion with me or other people who are in the video production community who are super smart, super helpful, super kind, you can join me and them over on my Discord server, and the links to that popping up there on the bottom of your screen. And it's totally free to join. You can either install the desktop software if you want to, or the app on your phone, or just run it via the website, so you don't even have to install software, but that's totally free. And it's a great community to be a part of, and super smart, helpful people are there. Very willing to jump in and help and answer your questions. So if you are interested in getting any of the products that I've talked about here today, there will be links that have been popping up to those throughout the course of this video. I do appreciate you using those because those do help the channel and help me to bring this kind of stuff in for testing and be able to show you guys for review here on the channel. But with that, thanks everybody for watching and have a fantastic day.